Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful Wednesday. Not sure where everyone is located at. Feel free to put it in the chat. But here in Minneapolis, we are starting to finally get some sun, some buds, and things are looking up. Things are looking up for us for sure this spring, and we're super excited to share today with you. And thank you so much for coming out. We are really happy and excited to be partnering with our friends at Lenovo and Google for today's session. I just have a few little housekeeping things to get us started before I hand it over. Firstly, if you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to put them in the chat. If you're unfamiliar with the Zoom platform, the chat is just in that bottom bar and it's just a little bubble icon you can click into to ask your questions in the chat, add any insights of your own. I'll be watching that throughout the session and getting it to speakers if we find a nice natural break. Otherwise, we have some time at the end for Q&A. Secondly, if you are here for that coffee, make sure you stick around until the end to do the exit survey. That really helps us know that you were here, you were listening, you were engaged, and gives us a little bit of information to help follow up with you. So thank you so much for coming out. I'm going to hand it over to Delia to kick us off for today.
Thanks, Kate. Great to be here. It is sunny here in North Carolina too. I'm Delia DeCourcy. I'm a senior strategist on Lenovo's worldwide education team and a former educator of 20 plus years. Excited to be doing our second collaborative webinar with Trafera in 2 months. We're almost making a habit of this. We have got a really great panel for you today, and we are going to be focusing on addressing the digital divide and looking at how to do that through the lens of the Universal Connectivity Imperative Report that SETDA spearheaded and released in January. And Lenovo, in conjunction with Google for Education, was really proud to be a sponsor of that and part of the work group. So that report focuses on sort of the current state of the digital divide and challenges, and then best practices for addressing those challenges. And today we're going to focus on 2 of the 4 areas of the report and have some robust discussion about that and hopefully leave you with some good ideas for how to move forward in these 2 areas. And given the current landscape, I think this is such a timely report and set of recommendations and best practices, especially given that last week the White House released the executive order on artificial intelligence in education and recommends federal and state collaboration to prepare students and educators for advanced use in AI. And there are a lot of ways that they're going to be supporting that. So this need for AI literacy and boosting students and educators' digital skills is imperative right now. So before we launch into our conversation, we do want to find out who is in the room, both in terms of the poll, both in terms of our panelists, but also we want to give you a little poll and find out who you are. So Kate, could you launch the poll for us? And as people are responding to the poll, I do want to encourage you to share any questions you have during the webinar in the chat, and please feel free to make comments, back channel. We want to hear from you in terms of what you're grappling with, what you're seeing, what you recommend in terms of resources around all of the discussion points. So we'll give people just a second to respond to the poll, and then maybe you can pop up the results, Kate, when you think it makes sense.
Absolutely. So far, it's looking like we have a good mix of instructional coaches, technology directors, some teachers.
Oh, we have a technology specialist, I see. Thank you for
Great.
specifying that in the chat. Great. All right. And also feel free to tell us in the chat where you're joining from. I think we've got people from all over the country. All right, great. Well, let's meet our panelists. So Cory, we'll pass over to you.
You bet. Cory Klinge, Director of Sales Engineering here at Trafera, and former educator. First 15 years of my career was in the classroom, and from there went instructional coaching and tech directing and all things up to my time here at Trafera. Excited to be here today and talk with all of you. And I can pass along to Jennie.
Hey everyone, Jennie Magiera here. I'm the Global Head of Education Impact at Google. And I think similar to Delia and Cory and many others here, had a similar path, started off in the classroom in New York City, then Chicago, and then spent about a decade there, then building leadership, district leadership, higher ed, did some work at the Fed level, and now I have the honor of supporting educators and students around the world. And with that, I'll turn it over to, let's see who's next. Is it Josh?
Yeah,
It
it's
is.
me. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you guys. If we've not met, my name is Josh Ratliff. I'm the director of education strategy at Trafera. And I'm a career teacher by trade. I still actually introduce myself as a teacher because that's easier to explain than what I really do for work. But I was a teacher and principal, and then spent most of my career before Trafera at the State Department of Education in West Virginia. And now I get to lead all of our education strategy at Trafera. Jisoo, won't you introduce yourself, sir?
Sounds good. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Jisoo Song, Projects and Initiatives Director at SETDA. Previously with the Office of Educational Technology at the U.S. Department of Education, where I had a chance to lead our digital access initiatives and supported the development of the 2024 National Ed Tech Plan. If you're unfamiliar with SETDA, we're a professional association that represents state ed tech and digital learning leaders from about 40 member states right now, as well as affiliate nonprofits and corporate member organizations that share our mission. We had a chance to lead this universal connectivity initiative with support from our partners at Lenovo. And yeah, I think that's about it for my intros. I'll pass it back to Delia.
Thanks, JC. Well, actually, and I'm going to be quickly passing back to you because you are gonna school us in what the UCI report is all about. I'm going to put the link in the chat to the report itself for those of you who are interested in looking at it. And yeah, give us the high level overview, Jisoo.
Sounds good. So I mentioned the 2024 National Ed Tech Plan, and the NETP says that the digital access divide stands between students who have sustainable access to connectivity, devices, and content, and those who do not. And SEED has been working for a long time to narrow that divide. Starting in the 2010s, SEDA published a series of reports that used to be called the Broadband Imperative that really focused on school building level connectivity, right? So it sets school level sort of per student bandwidth goals. It influenced the E-rate modernization order at the FCC in 2014 and things like that. And we've made great progress in that decade in driving the cost of internet access for school buildings down and getting more students connected when they're on school grounds. And then the last of those reports came out in, I think, November of 2019. So if you're following along with the timeline, you know what happened to the world a couple of months after Broadband Imperative 3 came out. 2020 hit, the pandemic hit, and students went home. And this really spurred a rapid national movement towards increasing digital access, right? We had federal programs created specifically to increase infrastructure investments through things like the BEAD program. People were prioritizing affordability of an internet subscription through things like the Affordable Connectivity Program. And then folks were prioritizing adoption needs as well through things like the Digital Equity Act. So between 2020 and 2024, that pandemic period, we've made a lot of progress even in trying to get students connected, even when they're not at school rounds, right? As we move into 2025 and look to the future, SEDA and our members started asking ourselves, how do we sustain those gains that we've made in those 5 years? How do we accelerate some of the progress towards K-12 universal connectivity that we've made, so that no students are barred from accessing, technology-empowered learning as described in the National Ed Tech Plan? And these sorts of questions that we asked ourselves are what led to SEDA launching the UCI initiative in summer 2024. And we had a goal to take stock of what we've learned so far so that we can properly chart the way forward. So if we can go to the next slide, you'll see sort of the objectives of the initiative as well. There were 3 things that we set out to do. First, really take stock of the state of digital access in K-12 education as it stands right now. 2, we know that our members at the state level have been doing a lot of work to increase that home internet access issues. So we want to highlight some promising strategies that states have been deploying. And then we want to provide both state and federal policy recommendations, again, to chart the way forward. The work was really informed through months of conversations with federal, state, and local government leaders, researchers, nonprofit organizations, industry reps, K-12 students and teachers. You could go to the next slide. SEDA members on our project working group, including Delia, help distill all of these conversations into key takeaways and policy recommendations that you'll find in the report. And again, you can see the link to the report in the top bottom left corner, excuse me. And if you could go to the next slide, the report dives into 4 dimensions that the working group identified as being sort of necessary components of achieving universal connectivity in K-12 education, which includes equitable access to reliable, affordable broadband and internet-enabled devices, reinforcing digital skills for students, families, and caregivers, technical support and building awareness of online and privacy cybersecurity practices, and then ensuring inclusive digital tools and platforms. I believe today's conversation will focus on 2 of those issues, so the digital skills and inclusive digital tools. But as the National Ed Tech Plan points out in its definition of the digital access divide, all of these issues have to be addressed together if you want students to have the opportunities that are afforded through the effective use of technology. So that's my sort of 3-minute spiel about what the UCI report was, and I'm excited to get into the conversation about it.
Fantastic. Yes, as am I. So if you'll go to, yeah, thank you. Next slide. So we're going to start by diving into it's goal 3 in the report and looking at how do we reinforce access to digital skills for students, families, and caregivers. So SETDA, the report recommends that all K-12 students have access to digital skill building opportunities, and that those opportunities really should be aligned to a community developed portrait of a learner or graduate. And that really, we want to support their growth as digital citizens. So, digital citizenship is a term we've been hearing for, gosh, a long time. And it's really about students being able to exhibit appropriate and responsible behavior when they're using technology, which can be a bit of a challenge. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But all of that is hopefully happening while they are learning to robustly use technology to find and evaluate and organize, create and communicate information, right? So we want them to really build their digital literacy skills. And with the proliferation of technology platforms that are being used in education, and has been going on for 25 years now. We're just seeing the need for the digital skill growth more and more. It's become more and more relevant and salient. So the first question I want to put to our panel is, what are the responsible use issues that you're seeing among different age groups today? I know what I started to see when I was in the early 2000s, when I was integrating technology in my classroom, but things have changed quite a bit since then. So Cory and Josh, talk to us about that. What are you seeing in your work at Trafera around responsible use issues?
Yeah, sure. I can speak quickly to what I saw on my way out of being a tech director and then in conversations with districts around the country in my new role. And that is a couple things that just come to mind. One is, responsible, the lack of guardrails at an early age around usage of technology. So too much exposure to technology at too early of an age, meaning not having necessary guidelines around use and responsible use and so on, which is it definitely takes a village and utilize it, or parents have to be involved from an early age. I would say a little bit around stamina when students get to school age, stamina and task completion, being able to focus on reading and writing and other core competencies. And then I would just say another thing that I would say on that guardrails piece is just kind of when there is early access, then there's peer pressure around that early access. So and so has a phone or whatever it may be, and I want one. And so those are the things that I saw often. I'll hand it over to Josh to kind of close out that thought.
No, I mean, that's a lot of really great information, Cory. I've started to think about digital citizenship as really having like 2 domains. And in one way, it kind of follows the traditional definition of being like an outward expression of, how we contribute to society and how we interact with others online. And then the other side of that is the inward piece. It's, what am I doing to cultivate my own well-being? And that does evolve some as kids get a little older, I mean, with a lot of what Cory said, with the younger kids, you're just teaching us foundational habits, the same foundational habits that my parents and grandparents taught me, the same foundational habits that your parents and grandparents taught you. Just understanding the difference between what's public and what can be shared out with everyone and what might be private information that you want to keep to yourself. And then kids get a little older, it's sometimes it's the first time they've ever had kind of that social dynamic of technology use. And so for the first time they start to ask themselves, like, am I good? Am I do I look nice? Am I dressed well? And so there's this instinctive kind of comparison mentality that comes on with that as we start to gain exposure to other people online. These are all good questions. These are things that we should be asking ourselves, but we just want to do it and make sure we're doing it in very healthy ways. And then as kids get a little older and are entering into adulthood, there needs to be an alignment between our online persona and our goals in life. When I ask questions like, does my online presence point me in the direction that I want to go? Do I have things on my digital footprint that would help me get into this college or help me get this job or prevent me from getting this job? And I'll say this and then I'll turn it back to you. Really at Trafera, one of the key indicators for us is, are we using technology in ways that brings people together? There is a visual, like a mental image of us doing technology integration in schools where you still have neat little rows and kids they have their nose buried into a Chromebook as if this machine has the ability to teach them something. And that's the absolute worst case scenario for us. We want to do the kind of technology integration that brings people together. That we say at Trafera that collaboration really has two parts. It has a shared product that emerges from joint reasoning. So you can't just have a shared product, Delia, like where you do parts 1, 2, and 3, and then I pick it up and start doing parts 4 and 5, and then we present it together. Yeah, that's a shared product, but it hasn't emerged from any kind of joint cognitive reasoning toward an agreed upon goal. And so we think about the kind of technology that brings people together, and that's really the cornerstone of that what we champion here at Trafera.
So really essential consideration of what collaboration means in a digital environment. And I love what you said about not having students sitting individually staring into their Chromebook, because that is not the ideal, certainly when it comes to technology integration. So you brought up so many great points, Josh, and I think one of them regarding self-regulation is an ongoing challenge. How do we help students understand the best ways and how often to use technology when it comes to integration? Jennie, that can be really challenging given how many tools and platforms are out there, and students can become reliant or over reliant on them. How do you talk about the challenges that are posed by this sort of rapid proliferation of AI powered tools in particular over the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is a question that everyone's asking themselves in and out of education. It's a conversation I have at dinner with friends, with my family. And the question is like, when and how is it appropriate to use technology? And to the point that Josh makes, like, I agree completely. I work at Google, and I also would hate to see students like just staring vacantly into a Chromebook, waiting for it to give them the answer. I think about one of the reimagining of the Star Trek series, the movie, where they show the Vulcan Academy, and they're all sitting in like sunken holes with 360 screens just by themselves learning. And that sounds horrific to me. Technology should, as people name, be bringing folks together. And I think the challenge is that sometimes with new technologies, we focus so much on understanding the tool and the product for the sake of using the new thing that we forget why we're there in the first place. And so, the big thing for us at Google is, number one, is as we're designing the tools, we are designing them for a purpose. We're designing them to meet needs that educators are articulating to us, that students are articulating to us, that parents, that human beings need. And sometimes that gets lost in translation. So if people are like, we need to find information faster when we're doing blah, and then we design a tool to meet that need, and then people get really fixated on how do I use the tool and not remembering the whole point of it was I wanted to do this thing to begin with. So I think like just really level setting on why we're here and what we're trying to do as human beings and as helping youth grow to be best versions of themselves, fully realized human beings and citizens of the world and their community. And then asking the second question of like, okay, this is what we're trying to do. What now is possible given these much, much more powerful technologies that have become available, and understanding what they can and can't do. And I think something else that's really interesting is educators are the MacGyvers of industry, right? And I love to just, I'm sorry if anyone here is a former attorney or a practicing attorney, but I am married to an attorney. I love him dearly. He is like the most uncreative professional ever. He's like, this is the tool, this is how I use it. But educators, you give them like, you know, a broken pencil and a piece of bubble gum and they'll write a math lesson. So I think the thing that is really interesting too is that educators are hackers by nature. And so it's not just enough to understand what is the goal, what can generative AI do, but then like, how can I rethink what it was designed to do to actually make it work for me better? So I think because of all of those different inputs, it's always complex for educators to understand how to reconcile new technologies with teaching and learning. But AI is changing so quickly, and it's such a schema change. I remember when I was first going one-to-one in my classroom, I felt like my brain was going to break as a math teacher. I was like, what do you mean I have to teach using this Chromebook? Like, where's the protractor? I don't understand. But now AI is like a completely different level of thinking about how you access and analyze and interact with information. And so, and it's changing every day, even for us. Like we're like, oh, AI couldn't do that. And then I wake up the next day, I'm like, okay, AI can do that now. So it's just a lot of moving pieces. So when it comes to challenges, I think the word rapid is one of the biggest challenges, that there's so many pieces of information to reconcile and it's moving so quickly that's really hard. And I want to say one last thing, Jisoo, I love that this is all founded on the National Ed Tech Plan that you worked on at the Department of Education. And I think for those who haven't read it, and you know, it being the foundation for the SETDA report, understanding those three digital divides, I think, is critical in this conversation. Like we talked about the access, but then the digital use divide of passive versus active use, we've talked about that. But then the digital design divide of how we're training and supporting educators to know how to use technology in impactful ways. I think that's the missing piece, and that's the biggest challenge that I know we're going to talk more about today.
So many amazing points. What the one that I do want to point to is, well, there are two. Josh reminded me, yes, learning is inherently social, and we need to make sure it continues to be that way, both in how we're designing lessons and how we're designing platforms. But then also that when we think about building digital skills, we are still fundamentally talking about developing students' critical thinking and creativity, because they need both of those things foundationally in order to use this technology effectively. So I hope that our audience will share in the chat what sorts of challenges they're seeing when it comes to digital skill development in their educational environments. And as you're doing that, Jisoo, talk to us a bit about what you're seeing in terms of state-led efforts to support digital skill development among students.
Right. And one of the barriers to being able to do this work from a system level standpoint, you know, is the funding piece, right? So we do an annual survey of state ed tech and digital learning leaders supported by the Siegel Family Endowment on an annual basis. And when we did the survey last year, only a quarter of the respondents said that they have a plan in place to sustain some of the programs that they kickstarted during the pandemic using some pandemic era federal funds, including those that were helping students build critical digital skills. So we highlight various methods for remedying this gap in the report, including the option at the federal level to potentially restore the Enhancing Education Through Technology, or E2T2 program, in a potential future reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The original program under No Child Left Behind helped states and districts establish some dedicated ed tech offices and implement ed tech plans to develop these critical digital skills. But maybe with the advent of these emerging technologies in classrooms, the re-emphasis on digital citizenship skills, the time seems right to revisit this program, which did go away in 2015 under the Every Student Succeeds Act. But there's definitely a role that local boards and state legislatures can also play here to increase the capacity of their respective state and local offices of ed tech. So on that note, I want to give a shout out to a couple of states that have been really putting in the work that we've included in the report. On the topic of digital literacy and digital citizenship, we highlighted efforts coming out of Delaware. We also highlighted this in the NATP, by the way. They're requiring the inclusion of things like digital citizenship and media literacy skills into core content standards. The New Mexico state legislature also passed the Digital Equity for Education Act, providing funds for the state education agency to engage in partnerships with some private groups to foster digital citizenship practices. We also need personnel, in addition to all these like standards and things like that, to develop digital skills among educators and parents and students. So we know that in Washington, they've been offering different districts with digital navigator grants, and districts are using these grants to host things like multilingual workshops to help parents and caregivers get more acquainted with the digital tools that their students' district might use and be able to help them from home. So lots of state level work being done. We're excited to see the progress that they'll make in the next year or so.
Yeah, fantastic. Those are some great examples. As we look at how we move forward in this realm and look at best practices around that, I'm hoping, Cory, you can talk to us a little bit about the report talks about the need for state and local ed tech plans to be developed or continue to be developed if they already are. Why is this a best practice, and how does it relate to digital skill development?
Sure. I mean, at the end of that question, right, is digital skill development, which is a student-focused, a student-centered component, right? So anything that we do as local leaders in the educational space has to be focused, of course, putting the student at the center. And so, of course, this whole webinar is all about access, and that's a student at the center idea. And when we look at it from that level and we move backwards from there, and we connect up to external forces such as state tech plans, we need to be able to have in place local technology plans. So we need within or like if you are an independent school, if you're an independent district, you need to have some kind of a technology plan in place. And it's not something that you have to go out and do alone. It can feel overwhelming. You can feel like, okay, I've got all these different federal standards that are out there from the federal technology plan. We've got, of course, SETDA resources, which are fantastic. We've got all these resources out there. And then we may have a state level plan, which most states have in place, which is really great because it helps give that guidance. But how do we connect the local to the state? And so I'll just give a couple of quick guidelines that I strongly recommend. Any locus of control that you have, any influence that you have within your organization, within your district, whether that's a school, a district, whatever it may be, some kind of entity, you want to bring people together to develop a technology plan that works for your organization. Couple of key things that you want to have in place. First of all, do you have a strategic plan already in place as an organization? If so, you want to make sure to connect to that, right? Before you can do that though, all right, and of course connect to all the external things I just mentioned, you need to get a group of people together, all right? So when we built our technology plan in my previous district, we got together educators, and that of course includes anyone within the organization that is an educator. That's a principal, that is a para, that is a, as far as I'm concerned, that is a custodian, right? It's anyone within an organization they're working with kids, they're educating. Parents, you want to get parents involved in this process as well. And then I really strongly recommend local industry leaders. Okay, and so when you have those people together, now you can utilize all those federal, state, and local frameworks and standards and guidelines and build your locally specific technology plan that's going to do the things that we need our 21st century learners to do, including AI and beyond. So with that, I can pass it back to you, Delia. Those are the things that I found to be successful.
Thank you. That was very, very illuminating. And as somebody who previously, when I was in my last role in district, I was straddling the technology and the instructional departments, trying to make sure that those silos, that we weren't so siloed, which can be challenging. And I think that particularly important when it comes to the professional development piece, which I'm going to ask Jennie to address here in a second, because we know that teachers need professional development around the pedagogy of integrating technology and building their own digital skills so they can build their students' digital skills. But then also you've got the question of, well, what's the right technology? What are the platforms and tools that the district has selected for use? And so how do you join all these things together, right? It's pretty complex. So Jennie, talk to us a bit about professional development and what that should look like when it comes to building digital skills among educators and students. What does this look like? And how does AI literacy affect this picture?
It affects it so much. Well, I mean, here's the thing. So my role, like many, when I was at the district level, professional development was something that was part of my job, as I know it was for many of you as well. And it was interesting because, there's the continuum of professional developments. There's that utopian version that research shows is like the best version of, professional learning, which is like long-term, job embedded, based on a community. So I would have fellowships or cohorts within my school system. And now at Google, we do it the same thing at scale, where we bring a group of educators together who are spending a certain number of months or even years together looking at problems or practices or opportunities, transformational opportunities, digging in, being in a community of practice, talking about it, unpacking it, and getting, relevant, just in time, on the job professional learning experiences sprinkled through. That's ideal. And when it can happen, it's fabulous. As we know, it's not always possible due to resources being limited, time being a huge piece of that. Then you get into like institute days, right? So it's like, let's take a day or have like an academy where I'm going to take one day out of a semester or school year to dive deep into something or do some summer PD workshops. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the next bit. But then again, not everyone can get there. So then you have your scaled professional learning, online webinars like this, or asynchronous, take on your own courses. My team's job is to look after global educator enablement. And so what we've tried to do is create an assortment of all of those options. So we have like AI EDU fellowships that have happened all over the world. They started in Korea and Japan, and then we did it all across the Americas. And those are like that utopian best long-term community-based learning. So people can grab that and do that for free if they want to. Then we have like Gemini Academy for full day. Then we have webinars like this. And then we have our learning center, our online teacher center, where people could take 2-hour courses as they want. The important thing that I think is that there's multiple doors of entry so that people can enter at whatever level they are ready for, they have time for, they have bandwidth, financial, temporal, emotional to dig into. And then I see a lot of educators who kind of enter through one door and then kind of vacillate and course correct based on their need. So we've had educators who are like, hey, I want to, do this long-term fellowship, and then something in their life, professional or personal, happens and they can't dig into it. And they're like, you know what? I think actually I'm going to go do a 2-hour asynchronous course right now and then come back to the, more deep dive later. But just like we create optionality for our youth, for our young learners in classrooms, we need to be doing so for our professional colleagues as well. And so when it comes to PD, I think it's always like diversity of format, diversity of time, diversity of investment, and just making sure that no matter what, it's always rooted in the needs and uses of students and teachers, not the product. So it shouldn't be, here's Gmail 101. It should be, how am I trying to communicate with educators, with students, with families? And Gmail is one of the ways you can do that.
Great, thank you. I love the word optionality. I don't think I'd heard that before we started planning this webinar, but I love your message that it's really about empowering our educators to be the lifelong learners that they are, so that they've got choices and they can personalize their PD. So Josh, we're going to ask you to bring us home in this section to talk about the ecosystem approach to building digital skills. What does that mean? What does that look like? How
Yeah.
do you approach it?
Jennie, just your last statement, just like it really nailed it for me. There are a lot of things in terms of professional learning that we have to think about in terms of just like mechanisms and formats and like how we're going to do it. But then that last thing you said just really crushed it. We think about at Trafera, which I should do this. I didn't give any context about what Trafera is. So if you're listening and you're not familiar with Trafera, we're an educational technology company, and if you look around your school and you see technology floating around, chances are we probably sell it and provide professional learning on how to make it work. So with that being said, one of the things we think about professional development is kind of being down one of two lanes and then they get a little blurry. So we do a lot of like product knowledge professional development. Like, if you've never used Gmail before, let me show you what buttons to click to make Gmail work. But you can know anything and everything about Gmail and still not know how to communicate with it. You can know anything and everything about your new Promethean interactive TV and still not know how to teach with it. So yes, we do the product knowledge piece where we're like showing you how to hit the right buttons. But then on the other side of product knowledge is pedagogical knowledge, where we teach you the art of teaching with that tool and how you can use that tool, when to use that tool, what differences it makes. And to answer your question specifically, Delia, a lot of that involves empowering the instructional designer, the teacher, and also the mentor and the coach. So, earlier GC was talking about the original EETT. I'll tell you a funny little story that will make this perfect. When we got EETT money the first time in the school district where I taught, we bought these expensive interactive boards that were $10,000 a piece, and there was a projector that was on a cart, and every time the kids walked by, they bumped it, and you had to recalibrate it. That's just the way it worked. And no one knew how to use it, but one day I had a whiteboard in my room, and the next day I had this interactive thing in my room, and I used it every single day to do what I've always done. I didn't change my instructional practice at all. I used it every day. And the principal came by and observed that and was like, "Gosh, I really love the way you're using technology in your classroom today. That's really great." And what I realized was like he didn't have the vocabulary to coach that. He called me writing on the board with digital ink really great. And he was being very sincere when he did it. And I didn't know the difference, and neither did he. So while we sell technology in the schools, when we come in to do professional development, we make sure that you understand how to hit the right buttons to make it work. But then we also make sure that you're inspired. And we work with instructional coaches and principals to make sure that they can tell the difference between doing what we've always done using the technology and a true instructional shift toward excellence. Because if you've never seen excellence, then you have the propensity for it to just, perpetuate mediocrity. And you just see technology being used, or you see an AI infused classroom, and you're like, "Hey, look at us go." Well, it could be that you're doing something amazing. It could be that you're doing the same thing you've always done, but you're using a different technology tool to do it. So that's kind of our approach, Delia, is to just make sure we're empowering all the stakeholders, the teachers, and also the coaches, the mentor teachers, the assistant principals, to make sure that they can tell the difference between substitution of technology and something that is truly innovative.
So it's not just the domain of the technology department to work on this. Yeah. Great. I appreciate that. Well, and to your point about making sure that this is accessible to all stakeholders in the district, let's shift our focus to the, I'm going to call it the pillar of inclusive digital tools and platforms, and what that means when it comes to bridging the digital divide. Kate, if you go to the next slide, that'll give us the framework for that. So what I first want to do is just sort of point out what the UCI report says. What is our goal when it comes to ensuring inclusive digital tools and platforms? And really, it's that all students have access to digital tools and platforms that are responsive to their variability as learners. So I'm hoping, Jisoo, that you can talk to us about What does that mean? And what happens when implementation without learner variability in mind happens? Like, what are the implications of that, and how can it be addressed?
Sure. And this really echoes, the digital design divide section of the National Ed Tech Plan that talks about the universal design for learning principles, as well as learner variability, right? So just to unpack it a little bit, the average district in any given year accesses nearly 3,000 different ed tech tools on average, right? And when you consider the factors that go into those decisions, popularity is still often the driving force that determines procurement decisions. What's your neighboring district using? What's your neighboring school using, right? Who's using what? And can we do that same thing, right? And not whether that product necessarily responds to learner variability. What is the student's unique needs, such as accessibility accommodations, right? Or the assets that they bring to the table. Maybe that's bilingualism, right? They speak different languages from home. So in the report, the UCI report, we advocate for system-level adoption of the UDL, Universal Design for Learning Principles, to drive decisions around curriculum, professional development, procurement, right? And if you aren't familiar with the UDL principles developed by CAST, it's a research-based framework that calls for using technology that provides learners with multiple means of engaging them in the content, representing that content, assessing knowledge, so that technology can be used in adaptive ways that, again, is responsive to who that learner is as a person, right? And there's proposals, at various levels of government, including at Congress, to create and support agencies that are dedicated to R&D around tools and platforms that are designed for these historically underserved student populations. We know that the Office of Science and Technology Policy earlier this week, announced the RFI to inform the National AI R&D Plan. So hopefully we'll have advocates talking about things like the UDL framework as you respond to that call for action. So yeah, just talks about, this section of the report just talks about, how can we make sure that the edtech tools that the districts and states are procuring are responsive to who that student is and their needs and their unique strengths and assets. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think, so given that, and thank you for that fantastic explanation. So I want to talk just a little bit about how Lenovo makes sure that we're doing that. And then Jenny's going to talk to us about how Google ensures that they are getting the input that they need from their users, especially in education, to ensure that kind of broad effectiveness and use. So as you may have noticed on the very first slide for the webinar, it said Lenovo Smarter Technology for All. That is our tagline, and that is really truly what we live by. So we have an inclusive product design office that actually make sure that we are holding up our end of that Smarter Technology for All statement. And so what we do is we make sure that at this point, 75% of our products undergo a diversity by design product review very early on in the design process, to make sure that they are usable by as broad a customer base as possible. And so obviously we're really, really focused on user experience. And so what I think is really exciting is that the creation of that product review then was a model for us to create our responsible AI committee that has a very high bar in terms of the products that we create that leverage AI, and then also the solution providers that we partner with that also leverage AI. So I'm really proud at Lenovo that we're making sure that our products are as useful as possible to the maximum number of people possible, and that is especially true in education. So I think it's these kinds of processes and attention to who's using our products, how are they using them, what are their needs, that ensures that kind of expansive inclusivity. So Jenny, talk to us about what that looks like at Google.
Yeah, absolutely. We have an entire process. If you could head to the next slide, making sure that we are thinking about what the needs are of the users, as I mentioned, is critical. In fact, one of the core values or core kind of cultures at Google is respect the user. And so when we're thinking about how we're building any of the solutions and tools that we create, we want to make sure that we are hearing from the people that we're designing for first, the basics of design thinking as you're naming. So if you go to the next slide, the first thing we want to think about is acknowledging that this is really complex to build artificial intelligence tools. And we want to make sure that we are doing so responsibly and thinking about everything from data privacy, information accuracy and bias, considering the concerns around cheating and plagiarism, content safety, everything that I'm sure you're all wondering at home as well. So on the next slide, what our team has done is first, again, root ourselves in the needs of the audience that we're trying to serve. So again, at Google for Education, we are serving educators and students. And so we have a team at Google called the Pedagogy Team, and they worked across the industry to identify these 5 learning principles. So we didn't make these up. We learned from the experts in teaching and learning to identify what are 5 learning principles that the industry seems to align on around inspiring active learning, managing cognitive load, deepening metacognition, stimulating curiosity, and adapting to the learner. So the idea is that like learning shouldn't be easy. It shouldn't be just like, give me the answer, like check the answer key in the back of the book, but it also shouldn't make you want to like throw your Chromebook out the window and like just cry. It should be like the right level of struggle. So to understand how to build our tools, the first thing we did is work with education professionals, researchers to understand these 5 learning principles. So that was step 1. How are we building? And everything that we build with teaching and learning indexes on these 5 learning principles. And again, did that through educators. Now, I love this quote on the next slide from Richard Kulata, who's the CEO of ISTE-ASCD and was at the Office of EdTech, prior to hit that role. And he basically says there, you can read the whole quote, but basically he's like, you have to have educators at the beginning, building anything. You can't build a tool and then at the 1 yard line, go to a teacher or a superintendent and be like, did I get it right? No. You need to, before blank sheet, what are you trying to solve for? What do you need? And then check in with them all along the way. So it should be built into the DNA of the product design process. And we believe this so deeply at Google as well. So on the next slide, we work really closely with a ton of different experts from a variety of different vantage points when it comes to education. For example, with child safety and development, we've worked with FOSI, the Family Online Safety Institute, Connect Safely, the Future of Privacy Forum, to shape our content policies, to think about like, how are we being responsible stewards of data? We're also partnering again with learning science experts to understand teaching and learning. So those learning science experts helped create those learning principles, but then also continuing to gut check and help us iterate along the way. We have advisory boards where educators, practitioners everywhere from the classroom to tech directors, CTOs in school districts to instructional leaders like assistant superintendents of teaching and learning, Ministry of Education officials from entire nations sit on to give us direction, feedback, tell us what they don't like about where we're headed with our roadmap. And then we have pilot programs where school systems can sign up and get early access to the tools, road test them and tell them what they like or dislike. So on the next slide, it shows this, and it's a circle on purpose because it's not like beginning and end, check, we did it. Like sometimes we'll go and then we have to start back over. So it's like researching, developing, getting feedback on the alpha. For those of you who aren't techs, that's what comes before the beta that you usually see. It's like the very, very beginning wireframe, then the beta framework. Then as you're using it, fun fact, every Google tool has a little feedback button that a human being reads. So when you click the little feedback button on the bottom of Google Classroom or Sheets and write, I don't like this button or this thing didn't work, AI is not reading that. A human being on our team is reading it and, drinking a tall glass of water and taking deep breaths and saying, wow, we didn't get that right. We need to start over. And around the circle we go. We go back to research, redeveloped, get more alpha, beta feedback, and then try again. So this is something like the process, and we have an entire team that does user experience research, UXR. We have so many teams that are just so like desperate to hear from educators, students, families to say like, what are we getting right, not right? Because we're a data company. We want to have data to drive our decisions. So this is 100% the way we work. And again, as Richard said, fingerprints of educator and student voice over everything that we build.
Wow, that was a great look behind the curtain that I've never had. So I appreciate understanding Google's development process. So we've talked about it from the Lenovo side, from the Google side. Jisoo, talk to us about from the district administrator point of view, what does looking at tool and platform adoption look like? So SETDA produced the procurement guide that I know provides a lot of great guidance around that. So what should people be looking at when they are considering the inclusivity of platforms and tools?
Sure. So I'll harken back to that annual state trend survey that I mentioned at the top of this conversation. When I look at the data from last year's survey of our members, 44% of respondents said that their states don't support districts in the integration of the UDL principles in different ed tech initiatives, right? And one area that the UDL principles can be really helpful is around ed tech procurement, right? As we talked about during the past couple minutes. So yeah, I'll quickly share a new SETDA resource that we built to help with this issue. So we know that, with the thousands of tools that districts access on any given sort of school year, it presents a challenge, especially for smaller and rural school districts with the task of vetting individual tools that for, how effective they are, how necessary they are, and things like that, right? So last year, we came together with organizations like CAST, COSIN, Digital Promise, Innovate EDU, ISTE, and One Ed Tech to form what we've been calling ourselves the Ed Tech Quality Collaborative to jointly define 5 EdTech quality indicators that folks can use as sort of a baseline for what they should be looking for as they talk with different vendors, right? So those indicators are safe, evidence-based, inclusive, usable, and interoperable. And that inclusive indicator is really about the universal design for learning principles. And again, these indicators really, aim to serve as sort of a common framework for evaluating and procuring effective EdTech tools. And as part of this collaboration between those 7 organizations, SETDA committed to developing a resource that's designed to guide both state and district level K-12 leaders in selecting high quality edtech products. So you can access the guide through the QR code or the bit.ly link there. What you'll see is a description of what those indicators are. And within those indicators, some model questions that you can be asking of vendors as you engage with them through your RFPs or other procurement processes to make sure that they are indeed safe, evidence-based, inclusive, usable, and interoperable, right? And it also includes examples of badges, certifications, different validators that can help you sort of fast track whether that tool sort of meets that indicator or not. It also closes out with 4 case studies of states that have been sort of moving in this direction to hold vendors accountable for meeting these indicators. So you can see a lot of good practices being led by state level leaders there. So just want to share that with the field today.
Fantastic. So to close out this section, Josh and Cory, give us a little bit more texture, color on this one. Cory, your experience in terms of procurement in the district. Josh, I know you've done a lot of work around UDL. What else would you add here?
Yeah, I'll keep mine short and sweet. I'll just say that I love this framework. I love these 5 things. One of the things that we were always doing as tech leaders, I know Jennie had a similar role at a much bigger district, but the idea always was like, how do we handle like things coming in and things going out, right? And how do we make sure that things coming in are actually going to lead to the pedagogical and learning outcomes that we want, right? And so I love these 5 things. I would throw one other thing in here in the mix, and that is what can you do to consolidate? So all of you have whatever your influence may be within an organization, but should you have the ability to be able to help move an organization towards consolidation, what I found and what research would back is that the EdTech bloat coming out of the pandemic, there are a lot of cool new tools and resources, but A, do they meet these benchmarks? And then B, can you afford them? So one of the ways in which you think about procurement of resources is affordability, of course, as well. And so when you think about consolidating, so for me, like I'm gonna like throw my bias in the ring here a little bit. I think like there is something to be said about consolidating completely around one OS. Like, I just think that Chrome OS is just a magical, wonderful tool to be able to consolidate around, with the idea that anyone within your organization really could be utilizing Chrome OS at this point. It's become so flexible. If you have other OSs that you love, that's fine too, right? But instead of running 4 or 5 different OSs within your organization or operating systems, consolidate and then think about interoperability and these other metrics here, so that you have that ease of use, you can scale it, you can afford it, and it meets those learner outcomes that you're trying to get to through your local, state, and federal plans. Josh, what do you think?
Well, just to piggyback on that, I'd say in terms of consolidation, we've seen a lot of people that are buying like, EDU Plus, like their workspace CDU Plus, and then they have this you were mentioning around, operating systems, but I've seen like people that have EDU Plus, but then they still have 2 or 3 other things that do similar things, and when we find out through audits and stuff like that that they can save a lot of money sometimes. I know Delia was wanting to talk about UDL, and I had this mentor one time that he gave me a little correction that has stuck with me forever. And I used to have this really bad habit of introducing myself and just saying like, "Hey, I'm Josh. I teach algebra and geometry." And he heard me do that one time, and he said, "Oh, cool. You teach algebra and geometry. What do you teach it to do?" And I was like, "Come on, man. You know what I mean by that." He was like, "No, I think what you're trying to say is you teach children how to do algebra and geometry." And man, that little nudge toward the individual nature of teaching I mean, it's pricked my heart, and I just needed to hear that as a young teacher. And that really embodies so much of what UDL is about. And I don't think we talk about it enough. I think that that hit a big splash for a while, and you would go to conferences and hear people talking about UDL, and I think we should talk about it more often. And we won't get into the weeds here, but I'll just say there's, three core components. Number one is to consider what it is in your classroom. If you're a teacher in your classroom, what engages those learners? Number two, how do they like to see information presented? And number three, how do they best express what they've learned? And we've never been better situated. We've never been more equipped in the history of teaching to individualize instruction than we are right now. And it calls back to a lot of the things that Jennie was talking about. The evolution of educational technology puts us in a place that this is a really cool time to be in education and be able to personalize learning.
I fully agree with you. And that is that would be a fantastic point to end on. However, we have a couple of minutes left. We have not gotten any questions in the chat, but I encourage any of our attendees to throw your questions in. We'll absolutely address them. And while we're waiting for those to come in, final thoughts from the panel. We've had a great discussion that has ranged from hardware to pedagogy, to procurement, to policy. So really, really rich. Final thoughts. Jisoo, what's your parting thought? What would you recommend people prioritize? Where do they start with bridging the digital divide?
Something that wasn't brought up during this conversation, now that I'm thinking about it, and since we have a lot of district level leaders in the audience today, something that I might recommend is over the next several years, your state's digital equity or digital opportunity offices, whatever your state decides to call them, will be implementing the digital equity or digital excellence plans that they've been developing over the last couple of years, right? And federal law mandates that they have a focus on building digital skills. So I would love for districts in the audience to go contact your state's digital equity or digital opportunity, digital excellence office to see how you can serve as a partner and be at the table as those decisions are being made, because that's going to move the lever on a lot of the things that we talked about during the past hour or so. So I hate to sort of drop like a new thing at the last 2 to 3 minutes, but it's something that wasn't brought up, but it will be something that you'll hear more about in the coming months and years. So that's something to be on the lookout for. Yeah.
Okay, great. Cory, what about you?
I would just say that what we keep hearing here is what we've been talking about for 10 years, in that 10 plus years, and that is that when we think about learning with technology or technology enhanced learning, We are looking at enhancing the experience. We are looking at moving kids forward towards academic outcomes that we want them to get to. So it is teaching. It's always been teaching. We need the quality educators that we have. We thank you, all of you that are in the educational world, for what you do. And we thank research like Jisu's team and Jennie's team that do that work as well, to assist in those areas. So thank you all for being with us today. Jennie?
Yeah. For us, as I mentioned, like at the end of the day, making sure that we're listening to educators like yourselves and elevating voices by educators is one of our core values and needs. And so one of the things that we've also started to do is curate really amazing use cases of AI for teaching and learning, where it's putting the teaching and learning first and then using AI as a vehicle to meet those goals. So on, I think it's the next slide or the slide before this.
It's the previous, yeah.
Previous one, yeah. We have goo.gle/AI edu examples is a repository of I think there's over 100 right now, and it's constantly being added to exemplars from all over the world of how educators are using AI to impact teaching and learning. There's videos, there's lesson plans. Right now, it's in 5 different languages. I think Korean, Japanese, Portuguese, Latin American Spanish, and English. And you can kind of sort by your area of need and expertise. So really excited about this. This is coming from our AI EDU fellowship that I mentioned, which is our like high intensity, top of the continuum professional learning experience. But again, I think one of the best things we can do in the world of education is share our experience, share our wins, to inspire each other, to guide each other, and to learn as a community.
Such an exciting resource. I need to check that out. So I just want to thank this panel for being here today. It's a tremendous panel. I encourage you all to check out the Universal Connectivity Imperative Report. It is lengthy, so if you would like a high-level overview, I'm putting a PDF in the chat. That's a one-pager that gives you that information. And I'm going to pass over to Josh to close us out.
No, thanks, Delia. Yeah, I mean, my final thoughts are you actually captured it. I was just going to say, I feel like if there's anything, I hope we created a little bit of a sense of urgency for you to go read the report, or at least the one pager. And then number 2, don't feel like you have to do this by yourself. You're not, I mean, if you feel that sense of urgency, like, oh gosh, I need to put some systems in place, or maybe I need to do a checkup on what's happening around my district. That's good. That's what we want, but we don't want you to feel overwhelmed or feel like you need to do it by yourself. I just dropped my email into the chat, and so hopefully we can stay in touch. Cory did that too. I don't do any sales for Trafera, but I can point you in the right direction, and we're just so honored that we can have these partnerships with Google. I mean, there's no organization I would rather partner with to have this conversation than Google and Lenovo and SETDA. I mean, these people get it. Yeah, Jennie, I'm sorry, I see your hand.
Oh, no, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh.
I just wanted to respond to something that Delia was saying.
Yeah, go for it.
I know you said that the UCI report is lengthy, but it made me think like people could use Notebook LM. If you haven't tried that, you can enter it in there and it'll make a little audio overview podcast you can listen to, like a 10-minute podcast about the UCI report or anything else that people are dropping in, resources from Trafera and Lenovo. They could put it all into a Notebook LM and then listen to it.
I agree. That would be an awesome way. If you've not tried Notebook LM, that would be a great place to start. Yeah.
Love it.
That's it. I think, Kate, we're done here, right? I appreciate all of you guys. We if you're not used to, if never been on any of Trafera's other webinars, hopefully you're on the mailing list now and you'll stay in touch with me.
And that was what I was going to close it off with. If you are interested in joining us again for our next webinar, we're partnering up with Google again for a webinar with one of our favorite people, Eric Kurtz from Control Alt Achieve. In 2 weeks, he's going to be doing a session called Chromebooks Can Do That. And it's going to be all about Chromebooks and Chrome OS, like Cory was talking about, for teachers and students together, and the amazing things that they can do for transforming the learning experience. So the link to that is in the chat. I put it up. You'll have to scroll up a little bit. So please register for that and join us next time. And thank you so much, Lenovo, Google, Jennie, Jisu, Delia, Cory, Josh. Thank you for being here and joining us for this conversation. And of course, all of our participants here for spending an hour with us. And we will see you next time. And thank you so much.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.